Scifi adjusted his biomask and stared at the pathetic blue marble spinning lazily in the void. Earth. What a joke. His targeting computer had been pinging this backwater system for cycles, and honestly, he was getting desperate. The last 3 hunts had been disasters. The Rigelian death worms turned out to be herbivores. The crystalline wraiths of Zixurian Prime were actually just really aggressive houseplants. And don't even get him started on the tentacled horrors of Zeta Reticuli. Turns out they were just misunderstood introverts who wanted to discuss philosophy. But this time would be different. This time he'd chosen the most primitive, defenseless species in the galaxy, humans. The Scifi Empire had classified Earth as a Class D civilization. No energy weapons, no faster-than-light travel, no unified planetary government. Hell, they still burned fossil fuels like savages. The evaluation team had reported that the dominant species spent most of their time staring at rectangular glowing devices and arguing about something called pineapple on pizza. How dangerous could they possibly be? Scifi's biomask displayed his impressive hunting statistics. 47 successful hunts across 12 star systems. His trophy wall back home featured the skulls of creatures that had given seasoned warriors nightmares. The bone crushers of Altair, the shadow stalkers of Vega, the dreaded quantum phantoms of the Horsehead Nebula. He was elite. He was feared. He was running out of challenging prey. His ship's AI, which he'd named Stabby because it amused him, chimed in with its perpetually cheerful voice. Scifi, I'm detecting a lone human male approximately 2 kilometers north of your landing coordinates. Thermal signature suggests he's engaged in some sort of recreational activity. Perfect. A single target isolated from the pack. Scifi's mandibles clicked with anticipation. This would be quick, clean, and finally give him something to brag about at the next Hunters Guild meeting. The descent through Earth's atmosphere was smooth as silk. His cloaked hunter-killer vessel touched down in a clearing surrounded by what the humans called trees, though they looked more like overgrown green sticks to him. The air was thick with moisture and strange organic scents that made his biomask work overtime, filtering out potential toxins. Scifi activated his personal cloaking device, feeling the familiar tingle as light bent around his massive frame. 8 feet of pure predator, invisible to primitive human eyes. His wrist gauntlet displayed the target's location, just beyond the tree line. Bioscans showed elevated levels of ethanol in the subject's bloodstream. Excellent. Intoxicated prey made for easier kills. He checked his gear one final time. Plasma caster, wrist blades, shoulder cannon, net launcher, and his pride and joy, a collapsible spear that could punch through titanium. Overkill for a human. But hey, style points mattered. Time to hunt. Scifi moved through the forest like death itself, his cloaking device bending light around his massive frame. His biomask automatically adjusted to track heat signatures, electromagnetic fields, and pheromone traces. The human's scent was odd. Most prey species gave off fear markers when a predator was near. This one smelled like processed meat, artificial cheese flavoring, and what his sensors identified as fermented grain alcohol. The target came into view through the thermal scope. A human male, approximately 40 Earth years old, sitting in a folding chair next to a primitive combustion pit. He was holding a cylindrical container and appeared to be talking to himself. The universal translator struggled with the words, but it sounded like complaints about someone called Sharon and her damn lawyer. Scifi positioned himself behind a large tree, plasma caster charging with a low hum. The human was perfectly positioned for a clean kill shot. No witnesses, no complications, just point, shoot, and collect his trophy. He activated his targeting system, and the familiar red dot appeared on his biomask display. The crosshair centered on the human's chest, and then moved up to his head for a cleaner kill. The plasma caster reached full charge, ready to turn this pathetic creature into a fine mist. Then the human looked up. Their eyes met across the clearing. The human should have screamed, should have run, should have at least looked confused at the floating red dot that meant his death. Instead, he raised his beer in a casual salute and said, "Hey there, invisible buddy. You want a sandwich?" Zrak's finger froze on the trigger. His biomask ran a full diagnostic, convinced there was a malfunction. The cloaking device was working perfectly. The human shouldn't be able to see him, shouldn't be able to pinpoint his exact location, shouldn't be offering him food. "I got ham and cheese or turkey and Swiss," the human continued, completely ignoring the fact that he was addressing empty air. "Ham's probably better. The turkey's been in the cooler since yesterday, and I'm not entirely sure about the expiration date on the mayo." This was not in the manual. Zrak had memorized every hunting protocol, every contingency plan, every possible prey reaction. Offer invisible predator a sandwich was not on the list. The human, apparently unbothered by the lack of response, continued his one-sided conversation. "Name's Pete, by the way. Pete Morrison. I'd shake your hand, but I can't exactly see where it is. You're doing that whole invisible thing, right? Pretty cool trick. My nephew Tyler would love that. Kid's obsessed with superheroes." Zrak's mandibles clicked in confusion. How did this primitive creature know about his cloaking technology? The evaluation team had been clear: humans had no knowledge of advanced stealth systems. They could barely manage crude radar detection. "You know," Pete said, taking a swig from his beer, "if you're going to lurk behind that oak tree, you might want to watch out for the poison ivy. It's everywhere back there. Trust me, I learned that the hard way on my first camping trip. Scratched for weeks." The predator's biomask highlighted the plant in question. Analysis confirmed, mildly toxic to most carbon-based life forms. The human had somehow detected his exact position and was offering tactical advice. "Silent type here?" Pete nodded knowingly. "I get it. My ex-wife Sharon was the same way. Of course, with her it was more of a seething, passive-aggressive silence that made you wonder if she was planning to poison your coffee. You married? Invisible guy?" Zrak's targeting system kept trying to lock onto Pete, but every time the crosshairs centered on him, the human would shift slightly, scratch his nose, or reach for another beer. It was like he had some kind of supernatural awareness of when he was being targeted. "I'm gonna go with no," Pete decided. "You got that whole lone wolf vibe going on. Plus, nobody with a wife would be stalking random campers in the woods. That's strictly single guy behavior." Pete opened his cooler and pulled out a wrap sandwich, holding it up towards Zrak's general direction. "Seriously though, you want half of this? I packed way too much food. Always do. Sharon used to say I packed like I was feeding a small army. Of course, Sharon also said I breathed too loud, so take that with a grain of salt." Zrak remained perfectly still, trying to process what was happening. In 47 hunts, he'd never encountered prey that tried to feed him. The Rigelian death worms had at least had the courtesy to try to eat him back. This human was violating every natural law of predator-prey relationships. "You're probably wondering how I know you're there," Pete continued, unwrapping his sandwich and taking a bite. "Well, for starters, you knocked over my beer bottle when you were setting up behind that tree. Also, your cloaking thing makes this weird shimmer effect when you move, like heat waves, but colder. And honestly, you smell like antiseptic and metal polish." The predator's biomask ran another diagnostic. His scent suppressors were working at full capacity. This human shouldn't be able to detect anything. "Don't feel bad about it," Pete said, apparently reading his mind. "I've got what you might call enhanced senses. Comes from 20 years of marriage. You learn to detect threats in your environment real quick. Sharon could be planning to redecorate the living room from 3 rooms away, and I'd know it just from the way she hummed while doing dishes." Zrak's confusion was reaching critical levels. The human was treating this like a casual conversation between neighbors, not a life or death encounter with an apex predator. Pete had somehow detected his presence, analyzed his technology, and was now offering tactical advice about his hunting technique. "You know what your problem is?" Pete asked, pointing his sandwich toward the tree line. "You're thinking too much. Predators are supposed to be instinctual, right? Go with the flow. Trust your gut. You're out there running calculations and probability matrices when you should be embracing the chaos." How did he know about probability matrices? Zrakth's biomask was recording everything, but he was starting to doubt his own sensors. "Take my ex-wife, for example," Pete continued, clearly settling in for a long story. "Sharon was like the ultimate predator. Silent, patient, absolutely ruthless when she wanted something. But you know what her weakness was? She overthought everything. Planned every move, every conversation, every argument. Me? I just winged it. Drove her crazy." Pete took another sip of beer and gestured toward the woods. "That's why I knew you were there before you even landed. Your ship's too quiet. Real predators make noise. They want you to know they're coming. The fear makes the meat taste better, or so I've heard." Zrakth's targeting system was having a complete breakdown. Every time he tried to lock onto Pete, the human would move just enough to break the connection. It was like he had some kind of precognitive ability. "Of course I could be wrong," Pete admitted. "Maybe you're not here to hunt me. Maybe you're just a really shy alien tourist who got lost on the way to the Grand Canyon. It happens more than you'd think. I found 3 lost hikers last month just wandering around in circles." The predator's mandibles clicked involuntarily. This human was either the most dangerous creature he'd ever encountered, or the most oblivious. Possibly both. Tell you what," Pete said, reaching into his cooler again. "I'm going to assume you're here on business, and that business involves me not being alive anymore. But since you're taking your time, how about we make this interesting? You want a real challenge? Try hunting me while I'm doing normal human stuff. Make it sporting." He pulled out a deck of cards and started shuffling them with practiced ease. "I'm thinking poker. 5-card stud. You win, you get your trophy. I win, you give me a ride to the nearest town. My truck broke down about 5 miles back, and cell service out here is garbage." Zrakth stared at the human in complete bewilderment. Pete was challenging him to a card game, a gambling contest, with an invisible alien predator who could vaporize him with a thought. "I should probably mention," Pete added casually, "I'm pretty good at cards. Sharon used to say I had a poker face like a brick wall. Of course, she also said I had the emotional range of a brick wall, so maybe that's not a compliment." Zrakth had reached his breaking point. This human was either the most advanced psychological warfare specialist in the galaxy, or completely insane. Either way, the hunt was over. He deactivated his cloaking device, his massive form materializing behind the oak tree like a nightmare made manifest. 8 feet of pure alien death stepped into the clearing. Biomask gleaming, mandibles clicking, wrist blades extending with a metallic whisper. His plasma caster powered up with an ominous hum, and his shoulder cannon tracked toward the human's position. 47 successful hunts had taught him that sometimes intimidation was more effective than stealth. Pete looked up from his cards, took a long swig of beer, and nodded approvingly. "Now that's what I'm talking about. That's some serious costume work right there. You headed to Dragon Con or something? Because let me tell you, you'd win first prize easy." Zrakth's biomask ran a full analysis. The human's heart rate had actually decreased. His stress hormones were within normal parameters. If anything, he seemed more relaxed now than when the predator was invisible. "The attention to detail is incredible," Pete continued, standing up to get a better look. "Those mandibles move independently, don't they? And the biomask has real-time expression changes. Must have cost a fortune. The smell effects are a nice touch too. Very authentic alien antiseptic." The predator extended his wrist blades to their full length, the molecular sharp edges gleaming in the firelight. Pete whistled appreciatively. "Okay, now you're just showing off," he said. "Retractable blades with what? Electromagnetically contained edges? That's some serious engineering right there. You make those yourself, or did you go to one of those fancy prop houses?" Zrak clicked his mandibles in frustration and activated his vocal synthesizer. "Human," he growled, his voice a bass rumble that made the trees shake. "I am Zrak of the HFY Empire. I have come to hunt you for sport." Pete nodded thoughtfully. "Zrak, right? That's a cool name. Very alien sounding. You practice that voice, or is it natural? Either way, it's got great projection. You could probably do voiceover work." The predator's eye twitched. "You do not understand, pathetic meat creature. I am death. I am the apex predator of the galaxy. I have claimed the skulls of warriors from 47 worlds." 47? Pete seemed impressed. "That's dedication right there. You must travel a lot for work. What's your favorite planet? I bet it's got some interesting wildlife." Zrak's biomask was now flashing warning lights. His stress levels were approaching critical. This human was treating him like a convention cosplayer instead of a lethal alien hunter. "I will rip your spine from your body," the predator roared, demonstrating by extending his wrist blades and making a dramatic slashing motion. "I will mount your skull on my trophy wall." Pete considered this. "You know, that's a pretty weak threat display. Very generic. If you really want to intimidate people, you need to be more specific. Personal details, psychological pressure points, stuff like that. For instance, instead of the spine thing, you could threaten to delete my browser history. Now that would be terrifying." "What is browser history?" Zrak found himself asking. "Oh, you sweet summer child," Pete said, patting the air where he estimated the alien's shoulder might be. "You've got a lot to learn about human psychology. Here, let me show you how it's done." Pete cleared his throat and assumed a menacing posture. "Zrak of the HFY Empire," he said in a deliberately spooky voice. "I'm going to call your mother and tell her you're not eating enough vegetables. Then I'm going to sign you up for extended warranty calls on your spaceship. And finally, I'm going to post your hunting statistics on social media with the caption, 'This you?'" The predator actually took a step back. That is genuinely disturbing." "See? Specificity is key," Pete said, returning to his normal tone. "Generic threats are forgettable. Personal threats stick with you. Sharon taught me that." Zrak was beginning to understand why the evaluation team had recommended avoiding Earth. Pete grabbed another beer from his cooler and offered one to Zrak. "You know, you seem like a decent guy, Zrak. I mean, sure, you're here to kill me for sport, but at least you're polite about it. Most predators don't even introduce themselves." The alien hunter found himself accepting the beverage, though he wasn't sure why. His biomask analyzed the contents: fermented grain alcohol, water, and various chemical additives. Harmless to his physiology, though he couldn't understand why humans voluntarily consumed something that impaired their cognitive functions. "You want to know the real problem with hunting humans?" Pete asked, settling back into his chair. "We're not actually the apex predators on this planet. Not even close." Zrak's mandibles clicked with interest. "Explain." "Well, take geese for instance," Pete said, pointing toward the lake. "Those things are pure evil. They'll attack you for looking at them wrong, and they remember grudges for years. I once made the mistake of not sharing my sandwich with a goose at this very lake. 3 years later, the same goose dive bombed me during my nephew's birthday party. 3 years. Zrak, that's dedication to revenge." The predator's biomask highlighted several waterfowl in the distance. They looked harmless enough, but then again, so had Pete. "Then there's honey badgers," Pete continued. Those little psychopaths will fight anything, anywhere, for any reason. They've been known to attack lions, hyenas, even elephants. Their attitude is basically, I might die, but I'm taking you with me. Humans wish we had that kind of confidence. Scifi was taking notes on his wrist display. This intelligence hadn't been in the evaluation report. And don't even get me started on Florida man, Pete said, shaking his head. That's not actually a species, it's more of a condition. Humans in Florida just lose all sense of self-preservation. They'll wrestle alligators for fun, keep venomous snakes as pets, and use fireworks in ways that violate several laws of physics. How did your species survive to develop civilization? Scifi asked, genuinely curious. That's the thing, Pete said, taking a long drink. We didn't survive because we're tough. We survived because we're too stupid to realize we should be afraid, and too stubborn to die when we're supposed to. Evolution tried to kill us off for millions of years, but we kept showing up anyway. Eventually, it just gave up. The predator's biomask was recording everything. This information could revolutionize hunting strategy across the galaxy. Plus, we've got this weird thing where we make friends with the creatures that should eat us, Pete continued. Wolves, bears, sharks, you name it. We see a dangerous predator and think, I bet I could pet that. It's like we've weaponized our own obliviousness. Scifi was beginning to understand why no species had successfully conquered Earth. The humans weren't just primitive, they were unpredictable in ways that made them effectively immune to conventional predator tactics. Oh, and one more thing, Pete added casually. This camping spot? It's actually a military training ground. The soldiers think you're part of the exercise. They've been watching us for about 10 minutes now, trying to figure out if you're supposed to be captured or eliminated. The alien's biomask immediately detected multiple heat signatures in the surrounding forest. Armed humans, perfectly camouflaged, with weapons trained on his position. His prey had somehow maneuvered him into a trap without even trying. Don't worry, Pete said, apparently reading his expression. I told them you're with me. They probably think you're my weird cousin from out of town. You do give off that vibe. Scifi realized he had been outmaneuvered by a species that considered juggling chainsaws a form of entertainment. The hunt was over, and somehow he had lost. Scifi powered down his weapons and retracted his wrist blades. For the first time in his hunting career, he was calling a tactical retreat. This planet is insane, he muttered, his vocal synthesizer translating the universal sentiment of frustrated confusion. Tell me about it, Pete agreed, raising his beer in a toast. Welcome to Earth, buddy. Population, too many, and half of them are probably Florida man. The predator looked around the clearing one more time, taking in the armed soldiers hidden in the trees, the psychotic geese on the lake, and the human who had somehow turned a hunt into a therapy session. How do you function as a society? Very carefully, Pete said, and with lots of insurance. You want some beef jerky for the road? I got the good stuff from the gas station. It's probably not real beef, but it tastes like victory and regret. Scifi found himself accepting the offering, though he wasn't sure why. His biomask analyzed the preserved meat product and immediately flagged 17 different chemicals that shouldn't exist in nature. What is this made of? Best not to ask, Pete advised. Ignorance is bliss, and this stuff will survive the heat death of the universe. Perfect travel food. The alien hunter activated his cloaking device, preparing to return to his ship. Human Pete Morrison, he said formally, you have given me much to consider. Anytime, Scifi, Pete replied, somehow managing to look directly at his invisible form. You ever get tired of the whole hunting thing? Look me up. I could use a camping buddy who can carry the heavy stuff. As Scifi made his way back to his ship, he composed his report to the Hunters Guild. Earth classification, do not hunt. Reason prey species has weaponized stupidity into an effective defense mechanism. Recommend immediate reclassification as hazardous to mental health. Hours later, safely aboard his vessel and heading for the nearest star system, Scifi found himself actually enjoying the terrible gas station beef jerky. His biomask had given up trying to analyze its contents, displaying only the message, unknown compounds detected. Somehow still edible. He opened a communication channel to the guild headquarters. "This is Scifi, requesting extended leave for psychological evaluation. Recent hunt resulted in complications." The guildmaster's voice crackled through the speaker. "What kind of complications?" Scifi looked at the business card Pete had given him. Morrison's Camping Supplies, it read. "If you can't find it in nature, you're probably not looking hard enough." "The kind where the prey offers you career advice," Scifi replied, and for the first time in his hunting career he actually laughed. Back on Earth, Pete Morrison finished his beer and started packing up his campsite. The soldiers had melted back into the forest, probably convinced they'd witnessed some kind of classified weapons test. The geese were still plotting their revenge on the lake. And somewhere in the distance, a Florida man was probably trying to ride an alligator. Just another normal day on the most dangerous planet in the galaxy.